Hello and welcome to the Best of EASD 2025 series hosted by the EASD Early Career Academy. My name is Simon Dreher. I'm a junior group leader in Tübingen, Germany, as well as a member of the EASD Early Career Academy committee. In this series, young researchers and clinicians from across Europe share their personal highlights from this year's EASD annual meeting. Today, we're joined by Vaios. He's a clinical researcher at the University of Leicester, and he will introduce his highlight, exploring factors that promote the progression from level 1 to level 2 hypoglycemia in the Hypo-METRICS study. Vaios, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introductions. Without further ado, let me continue with my presentation. These are my disclosures. So according to the International Hypoglycemia Study Group, we've got 3 levels of hypoglycemia. Level 1, that is alert level, at equal or less than 3.9 millimole per liter. And this is all about the warning signs an individual can feel, which prompt them to take action to correct hypoglycemia. Level 2, that's deemed clinically significant, at less than 3.0 millimole per liter, is associated with impaired cognitive function, inflammation, increased cardiovascular risk, and cardiac arrhythmias. It is at that point where neuroglycopenic symptoms present. And the third level, which is defined irrespective of a biochemical threshold, is called severe hypoglycemia and requires third-party assistance. We know that most level 1 events that is between 3.0 and 3.9 millimole per liter, stay within that range. However, some of these events eventually progress to level 2, that is less than 3.0 millimole per liter. However, we don't know exactly how and when that happens or what factors affect that progression. So the purpose of this analysis is to investigate which variables have an impact on the proportion of level 2 sensor-detected hypoglycemic episodes over the total number of events in type 1 and insulin-treated type 2 diabetes. You can see that ratio at the right-hand side of this plane. To do this, we use data from the Hypo-METRICS study. For the Hypo-METRICS study, 602 participants, 277 with type 1, and 325 with insulin-treated type 2 diabetes were recruited at 9 sites across Europe over a period of 10 weeks. These adults had had at least one episode of hypoglycemia in the 3 months preceding the start of the trial and were at least on 1 injection of insulin per day. They all used a blinding CGM sensor that was Libre 2. To do our analysis, we employed beta regression models and performed purposeful variable selection. We separated the variables into 2 categories: person-related, age, sex, and ethnicity, and glucose-related, that is diabetes type, mean SDH duration, awareness status, mean weekly SDH rate, glucose variability as quantified by CV, and CGM usage. With regards to our baseline characteristics, as expected, our type 1 subcohort was slightly younger at age compared to the type 2, 47 years of age versus 63 years of age, and the type 1 had more female participants. Also, the type 1 subcohort had a higher proportion of pump users, 36% versus 3%. However, none was on a hybrid closed-loop system. All of them were open-loop systems. CGM usage was higher in the type 1 group compared to the type 2, and both groups had similar levels of HbA1c, 7.3%. Regarding the CGM characteristics, as you can see here, the type 1 group had more time above range, 40% versus 32% in the type 2 group, with less time in range, 61% versus 69%, and more time in hypoglycemic range, 5% versus 1.6%. These differences were statistically important. The mean SDH duration was not much different between the 2 groups, 40 minutes versus 42, type 1 versus type 2, and the median SDH frequency was more than double in the type 1 group compared to the type 2 group, 3.6 weekly events versus 1.7 weekly events. On this slide, I present the results of our analysis. we plotted the odds ratio of the final step of the purposeful variable selection on the x-axis, and on the y-axis you can see the most statistically significant variables of the final step. As you can see here, for the total cohort, both type 1 and type 2, we found that the mean weekly SDH event rate with an odds ratio of 1.07, the mean SDH duration with an odds ratio of 1.01, and the mean glucose with an odds ratio of 1.16 were the more best predictors when it comes to progression from level 1 to level 2 hypoglycemia. We performed the same analysis within the type 1 group only and within the type 2 group only. And for the type 1, we found that the critical variables were mean weekly SDH event rate with an odds ratio of 1.08, mean SDH duration with an odds ratio of 1.02, and mean glucose with an odds ratio of 1.15. For the type 2, these were mean SDH duration with an odds ratio of 1.01, mean glucose with an odds ratio of 1.11, and age with an odds ratio of 0.99. In conclusion, mean glucose and mean SDH duration slightly increased the proportion of level 2 SDH events in both type 1 and type 2, with mean weekly SDH frequency being an additional factor in type 1, whilst age slightly decreased that proportion in type 2. Interestingly, awareness status, CGM usage, or coefficient of variation had no association with sensor hypoglycemia events becoming level 2 in either type 1 or type 2. Many thanks for your time and attention.
Vaios, thank you very much. And to everyone, stay tuned for our next piece of the Best of EASD 2025 series hosted by the EASD Early Career Academy.